My name is Meenakshi, and I work as a writer, researcher, and curator with Exhibit 320, which is a gallery in Ladosrai. And it is my pleasure to introduce briefly to you our artist talk with Nandan Ghiya. So Nandan Ghiya's practice actually spans over a decade, and his recent solo exhibitions include Images Attacked, the Blue Screen series, which was at Exhibit 320, and Photoshop V1, V2 at 10 Chancery Lane in Hong Kong. He was also a part of Post-Date Photography and Inherited History in India, curated by Jodie Throckmorton at San Jose Museum of Art, which then traveled to Ulrich Museum of Art in Wichita State University, Kansas. He has shown at numerous fairs, the Dark Arts Summit, and his work was also recently on the cover of Grantha magazine in 2014. With a background in fashion, which extends to his work both as a practitioner artist as well as in his profession within a fashion school, what is most relevant and pertinent to this context is how his work navigates through the many intersections of art making. So rooted in the ideas of perception and the many ways of seeing, his narratives are within the realm of photography, as both being reiterated as well as challenging what that might mean. So since we live in a time where images are generated, regenerated, constructed, deconstructed, and where everyone is both a producer and a consumer, nothing is passive anymore. So in that sense, Nandan's work speaks to that, and yet they are very particular, very specific, and I would go so far as to say unique in its singularity. So I suppose what his work does is instigate a lot of questions that make us think about how we look at material, narrative, production, and aesthetic in order to consider what constitutes a particular genre. So it does so both in terms of what the contemporary is and then what particular histories we place artistic practices such as Nandan's in. So without further ado, I'll allow Nandan to now get into his presentation, and you'd hopefully find more questions or perhaps even some answers. So Nandan.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Meenakshi, for the introduction. Thank you so much, Delhi Photo Festival, for giving me this opportunity to talk about my work, and I thank you all mostly for being here, and I will try to make this worth your while. So I have what I'm going to do is I have just chronologically, in a certain order, I've put the images, so I'll just walk you through the images. And my art practice, if I could sum it up in a sentence, is I paint pixels on photographs. That's what it sums it up. And I've been doing it for 5 years, and I conveniently called this project that started in 2010 Deface Book, because I was defacing images, and I'm going to try and share how and what of it as we go along. So the introduction of the whole thing, as you can see, there's an image of a pixelated person here, which was, so for me, the whole idea of pixelating images or painting pixels on picture faces came from the idea where I on a news channel for the first time I saw a person's image being censored, and this use of pixels, to conceal their identity. But the resultant image with the pixelated face was such a striking image to me as an artist, as a viewer, that as if we were looking at some kind of a mutant who was part flesh and part these square blocks of color. And what I feel, it had a strong impact on me in the sense that, I wanted to try something which was this, where, a mix of this digital and physical uncomfortably coming together, yet communicating a certain message. So this was the first, this also brings us to the fact that what am I doing here at the Delhi Photo Festival? So I essentially work with old photographs as my medium, And this is the first vintage photograph that I painted pixels on, which was way back in 2010. Now, uh, I'm just going to share a little, a personal angle as to why I've started doing this. I was born and brought up in a family of traditional art dealers. So, seeing old images, old photographs, paintings, textiles, I grew up in that kind of an environment. And, a business family, has its advantages and disadvantages. And I grew up in a sort of a curtailed environment where my father was overtly possessive of his art or of his things. And somewhere, I think, as I grew up, it sort of, I had this thing that, one day, I don't know, it was a sense of retribution or something I wanted to do to this so-called precious art, which lays it futile. Almost like an act of vandalism. And so this picture was actually painted, the moment I could afford to buy a vintage picture, I bought it and I painted pixels on it. And for me, it was just a statement that I was trying to make to my father. But little did I know that an artistic journey was starting for me. And back in 2010, it only seemed relevant to call it thumbnail, to title the work as thumbnail. It was not a work, but a first image of its kind, which led me to the first installation that I did at the India Art Fair in 2011. So it's a site-specific installation where I try to recreate a vintage space, one of these dilapidated havelis where, spaces where you come across these old images. And I sort of tried to do in the terms of the layout. So all these are old photographs. They've all been pixelated, and I've sort of tried to arrange them in a manner that is reminiscent of old Rajasthani heritage. So this was the first attempt that I did. And after this, so obviously, as you keep working, you keep researching, you keep looking for values and references. And I must say that, in that time, this whole idea of pixels becoming images in art, design, commerce, advertisement, media, this was a very prevalent sort of a sensibility. So this advertisement image was clicked by me in 2011 and served as a great reference for me to from here, I further tried to upgrade the installation. This I did in Shanghai in the year 2012 in the curated section of the art fair. And so anyways, so that was that. And then what happened since then, I'm going to talk about it. Now the section talks about my roots as an artist. Now this photograph is clicked by Sri Badri Narayan Gupta, photographer, somewhere in 1950s. Now it is so interestingly turns out that my own grandfather was one of the pioneering studio photographers in the state of Rajasthan, and this is a picture clicked by him in the 1950s, and that's him in the 1930s as a young man, and that's him with his wife in 1940s. Now my grandfather, being a studio photographer, has had no influence on me taking it up as a medium, but it's just a weird connect, And more interestingly, these two photographs, so I've been buying a lot of old photographs as my raw material to work with. And one kabadi, one pawn, one hawker, he actually brought these two images in a bunch of images to offer to me as merchandise. And I freaked out to discover my own grandfather being, tragically and miraculously, I came across these images. And even my father hasn't seen him when he was this young. So it's quite a rarity. And now the fact that I pixelate photographs, it becomes all the more relevant. So there's another image clicked by him. There's another one by him. There's another one by him. And yeah, the dates mentioned here. These are two of the stamps that I came across on his photographs. So I'm guessing the sticker is probably an earlier one and the stamp is a later one. And even the spelling is, I don't know why, the spelling of Narayan is different in both the pictures. So anyway, so that's my grandfather, and here I am. So now my works, I'm going to talk about these, these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, these are the 6 series under DFacebook that I've worked on over the last 5 years. I just introduced you to thumbnails. Now, I've been like, like all of us, I've been online, you're surfing Google, you're on social media. Now for me, the computer became a zone of studying, like in the sense that a normal usage of the computer for me was like, how an artist or photographer do their studies or experiments. So for me, even a normal Google surfing or just normal activities on the computer became food for the artistic thought. So thumbnails I've already spoken about. I'll talk about search results. So search results is a series that gets inspired by this whole Google search engine and how we've stopped getting off this screen and you just type in everything and we want all the results and everything. So that became an inspiration, and the idea throughout my work obviously remains where I find this juxtaposition between the physical and the digital. In fact, a very funny incident with this image. So this hand cursor is actually painted on the photograph. And I shared this image with a friend of mine, and he calls me and says, there's a problem with the picture. It's neither fully downloading, nor can I remove the cursor. So I was like, dude, I painted it. So anyways, so this is so again the thumbnail becoming a search result where I'm thinking whether I should click or zoom it in or zoom it not, whatever. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring out the digital screen onto a physical space. So that's what I did. This is a site-specific installation which is called the New Touch. So I mean, basically that becomes, and this is just before the touch screens are about to arrive, in the year 2011. So I created again a old-looking wall, but with these images there, and that little cursor is cut out in acrylic. So the idea was to get a sense that, I mean, I'm not sure, am I looking at a real screen or am I looking at a digital screen? And this work's called Chairman. And now what I've realized that, I mean, when you're searching Google and you write a keyword, and the search results are similar images of the same subject. And I didn't realize where that made a place deep in my psyche, and I started doing these collage works where I started actually putting images of same subjects together. So this work's called conveniently titled Chairman because they're people with chairs, and chairman as in, we can think of various human desire with the chair and stuff like that. So there's a little detail of the work. So as you can see, there are people posing, and even in studio photography, the chair has been a crucial prop since its advent. So there are men and women with chair, and that sense of power and everything that comes with sitting on a chair or standing next to it just becomes really fascinating for me. This one's called Male India Profession. Now you will notice my titles are more or less, they're inspired, work titles inspired by this digital language that we use. So Male India Profession again becomes a sort of, so photographs or over, from the early, late 19th to early 20th, mid 20th century photographs of people, and you can get a sense of what profession they might be. So there's a lawyer, there's a king, there's a god man, there's a tennis player, there's a havaldar, there's actually a photographer at the far right, and so on. And again, this female Indroid album, I mean, this Indroid was what Indian and Android, so I was trying to create a cool word out of it. But the works, basically, they just become a documentation of mannerisms of a gender or profession. These are the kind of things I do. And I find it really fascinating to see them all together in the sense, different age groups and etc. Status detached is a detail again. So there are sages and godmen documented together. And what I started, pixelating faces since the first day I did it. So that still continues. And this work's called Single and Available, again inspired by one of our relationship statuses and stuff. So there's a section of men, eligible men and eligible women. And then this work is called Men in Suits. So it's just putting, so finding photographs of people wearing suits. So for me, and because, having gone to fashion school, so for me it becomes very interesting to just as a documentation of, so whether it's sartorials or postures or backdrops, it just becomes very fascinating, and especially in the age where, you're bombarded with imagery. And this is this is where the existence of this photographic image that actually came into place. So looking at all this from the eyes of a 21st century individual, and it's quite overwhelming. So now there are two works. This one's called Happily Ever After, version 1.0. So it's basically couples, and then there is, I won't say gay couples, but yeah, there are two men posing together, and so I call it Happily Ever After version 2.0. And this work is now, okay, these works were made in 2012. Now, move over Google, Instagram is here. So search results have evolved into hashtags. So now I'm titling the same work, the same thing, repackaged, retitled. It's referred to as hashtag Men in Red. And so again, old photographs reworked with, illustrated upon with hand tinting and stuff. I mean, I don't just paint pixels on the faces, but I also try to restore the pictures. And while thematically trying to bind them together, try to find those visual cues as to give me a direction on how to restore the image. So hashtag Men in Red, hashtag pink postcards, hashtag heritage sites, hashtag travel. And then there's a bunch of old photographs which I've just painted the backdrops into these various hues of pink. I mean, to give them this very postcard-like feel, and then just put them together. So, okay, this work is called Virtual ID. I mean, I was always fascinated by these, virtual IDs and names, and what makes us decide that, this pseudonym that we opt for. So this work, I just put these pictures, and if you can see, I've tried to do, how you see watermarks on images on the internet. So something that crosses it, and then the company's name is written, so I got inspired from there. So this is called Ziggy Stardust 21. So an old man calling himself Ziggy Stardust, which is David Bowie. So you guess what, was he born in 1921? Does he like David Bowie? I mean, these are the kind of notions that come into your head when you're looking at a random profile name. So Big Lebowski, 43 for or Dr. Strangelove, 37. So, quirky titles which are very, very global or inspired by Western cinema. And then trying to see it in context to, these people where there's obviously no connection, which happens a lot with our virtual identities actually. Okay, now we come to the series download errors. How much time do I have? Okay, so this is a series called Download Errors. So the glitch being the quintessential. I think we've all struggled with glitch. I mean, as a kid, I went to the rooftop fixing the TV antenna, getting those things right. And when, stumbling upon images, they were partially downloaded, or, internet connection goes off, and suddenly my image stops downloading, or it downloads as a messed up image. And the frustration that it generated, it also became an inspiration for me to do this whole series of works, which I'm still doing. So they're basically glitched up photographs that, again, they are physical photographs, but they're made to look like digital images. And another thing I would like to say here is that, all our lives, we try to fix errors. We try to correct things. We try to ensure that nothing's wrong. And an error or a glitch is something that is wrong. And here I'm actually probably trying to reverse the process, where I'm trying to glorify or acknowledge the glitch. The error I'm trying to celebrate through these works, the error that our lives is, or technologies, whatever it is. So more works. So it's just, images and the frames made accordingly. I just thought it would be interesting to see what the image was and what it became. So that's the reference. So and I've also tried to include this little sign of error message that appears on a computer screen. So that's also hand painted and pasted on the photograph to just make a complete glitch package. So this is a detail of another work. So this is how it was. I had painted this on top of it, and then this is what it becomes. And so this is how the work was complete, and a painted photograph. And another thing I need to point out here is the title, as you'll notice. So it's called Download Error DSC0030. So I even started giving these individual photographs titles that are of the file name, that once you transfer the image from your camera onto your laptop, and it's actually the file name only that becomes the title of the image. Like usually when we are looking at books or stuff, wherever we see images, an image comes with a title. But on the computer screen, the title of the image is actually its number. So how an image is losing its identity, that it just remains a serial number. So the serial number itself becomes a title. Okay, before and after again. So this is what the original photograph was. This is what I did to it. Now, another thing I'd like to mention here is that I'm also following age-old techniques of hand tinting or enhancing the pictures. And I work with an assistant, obviously. And so we work together, and we paint, or we upgrade the picture, whatever we think, and then we create a glitch in it. And this is another image, and this is what it became. And another image with, on the same lines. Here again the title IMG underscore 7109. Two more of these download error images and more. Okay, this before I move on to the next series, this is one of my very favorite works that I did for a show called The Contemporary Sultanate in 2012. And the images that you see here was the search that I conducted to create this image. So I was trying to create a cityscape, and that's what I did. It's, I think, 35 feet, probably longer, probably 50 feet long work. And I tried to create a cityscape. And probably what is interesting here is as you zoom in. So this was my inspiration. This is what I created, and this is okay. This is a display shot from the show, and so this is how I created this work. Now, for all us photographer folk and artists sitting here, these are pieces of photo mounts that I have recycled and put them together, and more photo mounts, and then photographs and photo mounts. So these are mostly, so in the entire work, actually, the entire work is just a huge, like probably, I don't know, probably the largest, the longest institutional photograph in the country, if I may say so. So it's just, I've tried to, like, I've taken, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 institutional photographs, and I've tried to like arrange them in sort of like in one continuous group photograph is what I tried to do for this entire work. And yeah, this is what it looked like in the end. So okay, the next one after download errors is a series called Photoshop. Now Photoshop organically came about, and I think this is the only part of my practice which involves actual photography at my end. So basically, by after all this pixelation, I realized, hell, why don't I do my own pixelated photograph? Why just paint pixels on pictures, but create my own? So so I also did this one work called Photoshop version 1.0. Now Photoshop is conveniently borrowed from Adobe Photoshop, and I mean, so the duality of the meaning. So this is just people posing in photo studios. That's it. That's all how I try to group it, and it was meant for a show. So along with this work, I did a installation there, which this is the detail of the installation. Now what you can see is, so on there's the floor, there's the line, so there's a pixelated carpet which is set out on the floor for a person to stand and pose, and there's props next to it with the background. So this is the first attempt of the project. Please pardon the grandson clock, as somebody pointed out that a grandfather's clock was supposed to be much taller, but I did a much shorter version of it, but it was my first time. And so this is what I created, and then I got invited people to pose, and I took their pictures and things. So these were some of the results. So you can see the same language happening. There I was putting chairmen and married couples together. Here I'm trying to do something same, but with a more original approach, which means images which are first hand. And so again, interesting for me, how people posing in the same space with similar body postures and stuff. And this is how, so the viewer was welcome not just to pose, but for a nominal sum of money they could take one image away. So they were captured in a pixelated sort of a vintage photo setup. So anyways, that was the first attempt. Then I did the second attempt in 2012 in Hong Kong, where I tried to correct my past mistakes of the first attempt. And again, so then these were some of the images from that. And then here also there were practical issues. Like, for example, you notice this guy is not sitting on a chair. He's just pretending to sit on a chair. So then after this one, the third one I did in the India Art Fair in 2013. This one worked more successfully in terms of operations. So this is what it was. And without taking much time, this is how people, different people just sitting there. There were hundreds of photographs taken, so I just thought I'd do a collection of how, different people sitting in different poses. So that is what it is. I've also put together, so the first attempt, the second attempt, and the third attempt together for your consideration. And okay, another body of work that I ventured into. Um, uh, Before I talk about this image, I'd like to say that, in 3 years, I was working so much with old photographs as a raw material that even if I felt bored or I wanted to try something new, I knew I had to stick to a old photograph, because that was something I was getting recognized with, or there was, you're supposed to carve your own niche, or just stick to something. So I was having a difficult time, because the photograph was losing its significance as a raw material at one point. And plus there are, you always tend to compare yourself, that so many artists around the world who are also working with similar mediums or sensibilities. So how you try to like stay on your own ground. So anyways, so like I was saying that surfing Google or surfing internet actually became food for thought. So this is one of those pop-up banners, and what really caught my attention was unemployed mom. So there's a middle class crisis, and plus there is a provocative image. And these, how weird a place is internet, that these images in my head don't really belong together. But internet is one space catering to both kind of people, somebody looking for a job and somebody looking for some whatever. So anyways, so unemployed mom, so it inspired me to do this digital image. So of course, so I'm looking at a Parsi lady in a vintage image as an unemployed mom. I don't know why. And so this is what I did. And then I actually was fortunate enough to come across an image of a woman actually sitting on a sewing machine. And such a quotation seemed absolutely relevant to put it there. So I did quite a few of such works which were inspired by pop-ups and banners, where I painted this text upon these images. So this is from my soft board, details of certain images around that time. Again, these are inspired by these random slogans. So I'm trying to be funny, I'm trying to be witty, but I'm just, these random luring slogans that we come across online all the time. So I'm just trying to play with them. This made into one work, which I call Music, Philosophy, Fast Food. So all the three are photographs of kings, like erstwhile kings. And in our context, the word king can have three different meanings. So the king is dead means music, means Elvis Presley. And a pauper dies, so does the king. That's the image, which is a Kabir quote. And of course, Burger King at the last. So this was, again, like I said, inspired from those banners and pop-up series. Okay. Then, okay, this says Sri Dilip Vijay Varghia, as seen through camera mobile app, filters by a 7-year-old photographer. So there's this gentleman, he's a relative of one of my employees. So he shows me this image, and then he's like, look what happens to it. I was like, okay. And then I said, so this is what his daughter did to her uncle's images, So she took a picture of her uncle, just caught him candid. And this is what, an afro hairdo she tries, and I don't know, something braid and what, something hippie happening here. Now this afro hairdo, again, it just really stayed in my mind, because I realized that, I live in Jaipur, I belong to a Hindu Orthodox family. So, we have a very traditional setup. But this whole globalization, this whole, this internet access and everything that is happening, and how to these people who are so rooted in their tradition, and how like a sprinkle, like how these global values trickle in their lifestyles without them even realizing, And this afro hairdo on a middle-aged businessman. Left. Oh no. Okay, I'll just run through it. So this is what it was, and these are the three images. And what I did, inspired by these. Okay, this is another one of my inspirations. And then, so it says Mom and Dad as Agents Orange, circa 1960s. So I'm less interested in these works, but more in their titles. This one's called Dad as Manga Warrior, circa 1980s. And my dad actually came one day back with this really funny haircut, which didn't suit a Marwadi man of his age. So this work was inspired by that. So that's him, the Manga Warrior. This one is Mom as Storm. Storm is this, character in the X-Men comic mythos. She has this white hair, and my mom actually attempted something as funny as this. And then there is This is detail of an image, picked the hairstyle picked straight away from Royal Liechtenstein, which is what we are doing in India, that just picking images and just not even realizing if they contextually fit in. So the work is called Female 42 Married Hindu Blonde. Okay, now the blue screen, the last one. This is what I have done this year. So now I have, now why you wondering why this image is there? The first image that I pixelated, fortunately it stayed with me, and any of my works that don't sell or don't go anywhere, I upcycle them. So this is what became of that image. Now this is the latest that I'm working on, which I started this year, where the green screens and blue screens and the CGI effects. So how this blue screen, I'm talking about a blue screen like a gangrene taking over our physical lives. So rather than pixels, I'm going into a solid color, hence my blue. And so yeah, these are show display shots from the show that happened in March this year. And I'm out of time, so I'll just let you go through them. The blue screen is a metaphor, constant battle between a preconceived value system which we obtain from our cultural background and conditioning, and the digitalization which has become an unavoidable reality of our existence. We let the latter isolate and perplex us while we oscillate between the two. So what I've tried to do in this picture is actually a wallpaper coming alive, a wallpaper going all organic and amoebic, and it is taking over the photograph. So what I'm trying to say is, when I say this digital or taking over the physical and so on, so how everything is merging into each other, and we have the blue screen which can create like how we see in cinema and special effects, where today everything can be digitally recreated, So that is what I'm trying to work with now, and I'm hoping to take this sensibility into spaces along with photographs. So yeah, this is another one of the work from that series. These are show images from the event. So what I've tried to do is, so that this blue color, basically I'm trying to see how it's trying to come in, not attack, invade. So some sort of an invasion is what I'm trying to talk about, where it takes over the space. So that is what is happening here. There are some more shots from the blue screen, and this image is not very clear, but you can see there it is almost like an eclipse happening. So in the first, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think 8 or 9 images in this work. So the first image, you can see the whole photograph which is visible, but by the time it reaches its 9th stage, it's gone completely blue. So it's basically, it's died out to the digital or whatever. I mean, I don't know. So these are the things that I'm doing, and more display shots. So what I've done here is, so this is the work, this little thing, and behind is the wall painted between blue and white. So what is happening? So it was a good old photograph, and suddenly suddenly it enters this blue realm and it goes all warped. So that's the kind of something I'm attempting to do, and more display shots, and more display shots, and more display shots. And thank you so much.